everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Hallmark Heartbeats, a podcast all about Hallmark movies. I am your host, Camille. And today I wanted to try a little bit of something different. Most of the time, you guys only get audio podcasts when it comes to movie reviews. You usually only get video of the podcast when I am doing an interview. But I wanted to try something a little bit different this week, which is a video podcast. See how this works? It's also going to be released on all audio platforms like all the other podcasts that I've been doing. It's going to be on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much any platform that you guys listen to a podcast. It will also be in audio form, but I thought, why not do a video as well? So, if this works out, all of my What Calls the Heart episode reviews will be on this platform. Comment below to tell me what you guys think of it. Anyway, this week, Hallmark released the newest episode of What Calls the Heart. It is the second episode of season 9. The title of it is Episode 2, Out Like a Lamb. I have my notes ready with the outline and everything, and let's go step by step on what happened in this episode. First up, mayoral race. In the end of season 8, there were 3 different people signed up to do the mayoral race, and that was Mike Hickam, Bill, and Lee Coulter. This episode, we find out who won the race, and who here is surprised that it was Mike? I wasn't surprised. I kind of called it at season 8 when they were all signing up. I was thinking to myself, like, I think out of the 3 characters, Mike would be a good one, mostly because we don't know who Mike is, really. You know, we know he works for Goen Petroleum. We know he's like he has a thing for Fiona, but he really doesn't have a storyline on What Calls the Heart, unlike Bill and Lee. And I've always felt like out of the 3 men who signed up for the race, he would benefit the most. And I was right. Oh fuck. After a recount, which was comedy to me. I mean, here's the thing. 2020 presidential election was just a little over a year ago. And who remembers the drama of, like, you know, election fraud, accusations of that, Supreme Court weighing in, you know, stop the count, keep on counting, and of course January 6th. I mean, it is quite a reminder, and also, I don't know, I feel like the fact that we still 100 years later are having election drama that a TV show set in the 1920s can relate to and seem realistic, I guess. I think that shows how little progress we have with our elections. I mean, I think, if anything, this might, you know, this shows us that we kind of need to update our election practices if we're facing the same problems, I guess, 100 years later. But yes, Mike won the race. I called it. I wasn't surprised. Yay, Mike. I loved Fiona's reaction to the announcement. Everybody else was shocked, Hickam wasn't there when he was announced as mayor. Come to find out, he was helping another neighbor with their cows or whatever, which I think is a testimony to who Hickam is. Hickam is a good guy who helps other people, is part of the community or whatever. And I feel like that is what makes a good mayor, in my opinion, anyway. Um, I'm excited to see what he's going to do as a mayor. They haven't had a mayor really since Abigail left in season 6. She was the last mayor of Hope Valley. So, yeah, I'm excited to see that. To avoid conflict of interest, though, Mike stepped down from going to petroleum and decided to give his shares to Fiona. So, um, I'm glad that he is taking the mayoral job seriously and stuff. Now, the person who had the hardest time, really, with finding out that he lost the election was Lee, because from what he told Rosemary, this was, I guess, his way of like finding his purpose in town. And I'm sitting there going, dude, you're like one of the two biggest employers in town. I think you have a purpose. You're also very respected and stuff in town. You don't need the title mayor. You haven't needed it for like 6 years. But I guess he had his hopes up. I mean, he even had an acceptance speech in his pocket, ready to give it, you know, ex- expecting to win. Um, but Rosemary, I guess, wanted to like get him out of the slump and offered him the managing editor position of the Voice, the Valley Voice, and he accepted it. So now him and Rosemary are going to be working together. Okay, so the other another plot point about this show is Lucas and Elizabeth. They're the main couple now, as we all know. Lucas was chosen between him and Nathan. Um, the last time that we saw them, they were riding off into the sunset on a hot air balloon that was piloted by Lucas. And Elizabeth in this episode just kind of reminded him that, you don't need to have the big grand gestures of hot air balloon and sunset rides or whatever to show me that you love me. You don't need that. And I think that's a good reminder for everybody. Is that you don't need big things to sometimes to tell somebody that you love them. Little things count too. Some of the little moments that they shared is like walking, him escorting her home, her giving him a special teacup, um, just hand holding is one. Getting her ice cream and little Jack ice cream as well. I mean, here's the thing, she's a single mother. I feel like the best little moment that Lucas could show that he really loves Elizabeth and wants to, be a part of her life is to spend all that energy by loving on her son, who's probably the most important person in her life, you know, and getting close to him and stuff. Because honestly, without little Jack's approval, I'm pretty sure Elizabeth and Lucas would survive. Um, but that's pretty much it with Lucas and Elizabeth. They did share some scenes with Nathan, which I have to talk about because. Okay, so here's the thing. Lucas and Nathan for like 2 seasons were fighting over Elizabeth, right? Like fighting. They were not fighting like fisticuffs, but rivalries, I guess, rivals, and I have this point of contention about one scene in this episode where Lucas and Nathan, Lucas gives him ice cream in the hospital room or whatever, and Nathan goes, "You don't have to do this for me, because you feel guilty or whatever." And Lucas is like, "What do I have to feel guilty about?" And he was like, "Because of Elizabeth." And I'm sitting there going, "What does Lucas have to feel guilty about? He didn't do anything." Elizabeth wasn't Nathan's, never Nathan's. She was a single woman. There was no previous link to Nathan. What would Lucas have to feel guilty about? I mean, I would understand if, like, he stole he stole Elizabeth from Nathan, but she was never his property. Like, she was never his girlfriend or wife or anything like that. All three people were single, unattached, and Elizabeth freely chose Lucas. No guilt. There's no guilt. It was kind of presumptuous that, in my opinion, anyway, that Nathan would think that Lucas had some guilt. I mean, like, for what? I didn't get it. So, yeah, that was a little bit crazy. Let me hear. What did you guys think? Do you guys think that Lucas had anything to feel guilty about? What kind of little moments do you share with your partner that shows that you love them or that they love you? Please comment below and tell me. I would like to know. For me, I just love, one of my main love languages is touch. I'd like to have someone hold my hand or, hug me, that kind of thing. I think that is sweet and adorable, and it makes me feel loved and safe. Another love language of mine that is very important is verbal, talking to me, compliments. I like to hear, "Hey, good job. Hey, I'm proud of you." Those are words of affirmation that I eat up and that I appreciate very much. So please let me know in the comments below what kind of love language do you guys expect from your partner. Another plot point from this episode was Mei Su. Mei Su is the new pharmacist in town. We still don't know her backstory. I still hold on to the idea that she's running away from her husband because of a domestic violence situation. I honestly feel like her secrecy, her running away, her avoiding questions, asking Bill for help. I don't know. To me just screams she was beat by her husband, which would be a very hard and tough subject, and probably a subject that most Hardys would not expect Hallmark to touch on their show. But again, I didn't expect them to talk about racism in season 8, to talk about medical racism or anything like that in season 8. Maybe they're not going a little grittier and showing real life, which is sadly domestic violence, especially at the time, is very prominent, and divorce is hard for women, But as we found out in episode 1, Ned all this time had thought that he was talking to Mei's husband, you know, hiring him to be the pharmacist for his soda shop slash pharmacy. Um, but surprise, surprise, it was not Mei's husband that he was talking to. It was Mei herself. Now, Mei did pose a question to Ned. If you had known I was a woman, would you have hired me? I would even go further and say if you had known my name is Mei Su, which is, Oriental, Asian um, based, would you have hired me? I I think no. I'm going to say this right now. I don't think Ned would have hired Mei if he knew she was a woman. Why? Because at the time, women were looked at as second class citizens in 1910s. I mean, call back to season 1 when they had the female prosecutor, female lawyer, come to town to try Henry Gowen, for like knowing about the dangers in the mines, in the coal mines. Everyone was shocked that she was a woman. And they even questioned if, what her education background is. Everything. And to be honest with you, it still happens today. Men are more likely are more accepting for like a higher powered job than a woman. A woman, and this is without the race factor, will first be questioned on their qualifications more so than a man. But oh my God, even more so if that woman is a woman of color. Think about it, okay? I'm going to give you an example of current times. President Biden has promised to pick a black woman as the next Supreme Court justice. Now, no other justice has ever been demanded to show their LSAT scores, to show their degrees, to look at their background. I mean, here's the thing. Amy Coney Barrett, she had far less court cases in her belt than most of the justices now, plus including the justice that President Biden is thinking about. And she was voted through into the Supreme Court without being asked her LSAT scores or anything like that. Her record as a judge was public. The lack of cases that she's faced is public. No one questioned whether or not she was right to Supreme Court justice. But President Biden's was. And then people were saying things like, oh, well, I mean, like, she's being hired because she's a black woman and, Biden promised a black woman in court. Guess what? Ronald Reagan also promised a woman to be a justice in Supreme Court justice, and that's a platform that he ran on before he chose Sandra Day O'Connor. And nobody had a problem with that. I am just saying that there is a discrepancy with how men is looked at versus a woman, and then how white women's qualifications are looked at versus a woman of color. It is a very if you guys look and open your eyes, it is very clear the story. So I I honestly don't think Ned would have hired Mei Su if he had known she was a woman. And I definitely don't think he would have hired Mei Su if he knew her name was Mei Su. And I don't, and as I, I, I don't think it's a race thing. I don't think it's. I think it's more of a times because I'm pretty sure, the actors are not looking at it now in the in the 2020. Like they're not gonna hire somebody because of their gender or because of their race. I mean, of course, that would be called discrimination. That would be against the law. But also, in the 1910s, yeah, I don't think May would have gotten the job as a pharmacist. Anyway, May's plot point for this episode was that she was the only person who was able to get close enough to Nathan's horse, Newton, who was injured during the car accident. His leg was bleeding, and he kept, favoring his leg. So, yeah, the leg, Mei Su was the only person who got close enough to fix the leg, and I'm glad that she did. Nathan throughout this episode was on bed rest in the infirmary. Faith was taking care of him, and it's so great to see Faith, being the older doctor, while Carson was the town doctor. She was like his underling. She was always looked at as not the head doctor. It was always Carson, which is again something that they brought up in season 8. And I guess again part of the times, because again women were at the time looked at as a second class citizen. So yeah, I am glad to see Faith taking on the head town doctor, loving it, and she is totally killing it. I laughed my butt off though when Elizabeth went to see Nathan, and Nathan faked amnesia. Was like, "Who are you again? Do I know you?" I thought that was so hilarious and typical Nathan. I loved, again, everything to do. I already said my point of view about the whole Lucas Nathan exchange with guilt. But I do have to say that I am glad to see both men are working on their friendship. And hopefully this becomes a symbolism for the Team Nathan, Team Lucas fans and stuff. But you never know. Anyway, the next plot point that I want to talk about is the Canfields and Coop, their son, is I guess rebelling. I don't know. He told his mom. He asked his mom, "Do I have to keep going to church? Do I have to go to church again?" because he's starting to question authority. He's starting to question his beliefs or whatever. Mindy's response was, let's talk to your dad. Let's talk about it or whatever. Joseph's response was, you're going to church. There's nothing to talk about. And my thoughts are, why? I mean, I get it. He's a child, and it's a parent's job to, I guess, lead their children to what they think is right. But forcing somebody to do something that they don't want to do is gonna make them hate the thing more. You know, that's my opinion. That's my that's what I had went through. We all, I guess, in some point of our lives, question what is taught of us. If you keep forcing the child to believe what you believe without like letting them explore their thoughts or whatever, then that's not respecting your child. And in my opinion, the thing that really got to me was Joseph's response was, what will people say if my child doesn't go to church and I'm the pastor? And I'm sitting there going, why do you care what other people will think about you? You care more about the appearance, your family's appearance, than your own child's doubts and questions. I think, in my opinion, there should have been a middle ground. Maybe Coop just wants to not be in church, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't believe in God. And I truly believe that you don't need a building, a church, or whatever to have a relationship with God. And if he doesn't want to go to church, let him not go to church and let him find his way back to church. And I had a really big issue with like Joseph's, well, what will other people think? Who cares? Who gives a crap? That is your son who is questioning his faith. And, at this point, appearance shouldn't matter as much as your child's mental health, as much as your child, showing support for your child. That's my opinion, but hey, who am I to say? I'm not a Christian or a parent, but I will say this. I started questioning the church really young. Probably around Coop's age. I started questioning the church. Mostly because I was like Job. I went through a really, really hard time in my life. A lot of hard times in my life. And I was like, God, if you're real, why are you making me go through these things? And I was just a child. My foster parents, took me to church with them. And I went to church with them. But they didn't force me to participate in the church. Like, I was in the building, if you could say so. But I wasn't like, singing with the songs. I wasn't like, I was reading the Bible verses, but I wasn't like, it wasn't soaking in or whatever. I got um, baptized into the church, like maybe 5 years later. But it was slow. It was like on my own journey, and it was just like, nobody forced me to it or whatever. At around 20 years old, I started questioning the church again. And this time as an adult, I didn't have like someone like making me go to church with them. I and but the more that I learned academically about the background of Christianity and how Christians treated people and stuff like that, all in the Word of God, using the Word of God, I was like, oh no, oh no, 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 I'm not going back to church. So I haven't been back to church really. The last time I went to church was like about, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. Um, I don't regret not going to church. And I know people say things like you shouldn't judge a whole religion based on a few bad apples, or these are not real Christians, all of these nonsense. But here's the thing: they call themselves Christian. They're the loudest voice, and the good Christians aren't saying anything or aren't saying it loud enough, in my opinion. And it's just discouraging. I do still love God. I still believe in God. But I just refuse to claim a religion. So I guess I'm sort of like Coop. So I've been Coop several times in my life. I just hope that Minnie and Joseph allows him to come back to church in his own terms, in his own time. I think that's the best way to do it. Anyway. And then the last plot point was Henry. Season premiere, got into fisticuff with Jerome Smith, who was a businessman introduced to town by Fiona and Hickam. He was supposed to invest in the pipeline for the Goa Petroleum. He has a past with Henry because they both were part of the Pacific Mining Northwest Company. They didn't expand much on what Jerome position was, but we do know that Jerome knows about Henry trying to warn the company about the dangers of the coal mines. Knows that the company ignored Henry's warnings, but that's about it. Henry came back. Uh, Henry had left Hope Valley in season 8. And we find out between season 8 and season 9, he had gone to see Abigail. And he had also gone to see his son, Christopher, who was introduced to Coal Valley in season 8. He had fallen in love with Lee's niece, Rachel, who we also saw in season 8. And we find out this episode that they're engaged. They look like they're about to get married. Wonder if Lee and Rosemary will be invited to that wedding. I would hope that Lee and Rosemary not only will be invited to the wedding, but also know that their niece is engaged. Because Lee and Rosemary helped her grow up and find her identity and be an individual or whatever during her time at Hope Valley. Um, she wanted to stay at Hope Valley and probably would have if the dress shop stayed open. So I hope that they would have been part of the wedding, or at least know that Rachel was engaged. I mean, I'm surprised Lee and Rosemary never even brought up their niece this season so far. Maybe they'll bring her up and see later in the season, and maybe Rachel will come visit. Anyway, um, Elizabeth had invited Henry to come to the school and make a speech about the fight, kind of discouraging the students from solving their conflicts with violence. And Henry did at the end. He told them, if we hurt one another, we will all end up in pain. So in other words, if you start a fight with one person, it's gonna hurt. It's not only gonna hurt the person that you hit, it's gonna hurt yourself as well. Which I guess is a nice speech. Fiona also knew about Henry and Jerome's past and went to Henry to tell him, look, I am sorry for, bringing him in without, telling you. Henry thanked her for the apology and told her, thank you for reminding me to not forget the important stuff, to keep an eye on the important stuff. Also, at the end of the episode, Henry does go to church on Sunday, attends the service and stuff. Jerome doesn't seem to be going away, though, because at the end of the episode, he tells Henry that he will be bringing in investors for the pipeline. So I wonder what's going to happen with that. This is only episode 2, so there is going to be more drama in the season. Next week, I will be talking about episode 3. From what we know, it looks like Lucas is a suspect for Nathan's accident. I don't like that at all. That is not cool. I honestly think that this is a bad take on Hallmark because how do I say this? The fandom is still divided between the two men. You guys want unity with all of the Hardys, but this storyline will divide the Hardys. We know that Lucas did not hit Nathan, but just the implication that he could have been, or that he was a suspect of the accident, is just driving the dagger deeper in the fandom. And also confirming what a lot of people have been saying, that the powers that be are just sensationalizing their storylines, which is what you do when you want more of an audience. But yeah, this doesn't look good. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys again next week. I will be releasing 2 reviews next week, and that is Presence of Love, starring Eloise Mumford and Julian Morris, as well as episode 3 of Fun Calls to Heart, season 9. See y'all next week. Bye. Oh, subscribe and comment below. Tell me your thoughts and your opinions. Hope y'all enjoy the week, and I'll see you later. Bye!